Dinner had always been a time for stories. Lucas, at 8 years old, was usually bubbling with excitement, eager to recount the day's adventures from schoolyard games to his latest drawings. But tonight was different. His small hand poked at his food, dragging his fork through mashed potatoes, his lips pressed tightly together. I watched him, sensing something was off. "Lucas, are you okay, buddy?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. The question hung in the air longer than expected. "Ed." He didn't look up. His shoulders hunched over as if shielding himself from something he couldn't explain. A few tense seconds passed before he finally glanced at me. His eyes shimmered with the kind of fear a child should never have to bear. He dropped his fork. The clatter echoed unnaturally loud in the stillness of the room. And without warning, he launched himself out of his chair and into my arms. His small body trembled, and I felt his tears soaking into my shirt. Daddy, I saw something." His voice was barely a whisper, but the fear in it cut through me like ice. I knelt down, pulling him closer, rubbing his back. Hey, it's okay. You can tell me," I said softly, unsure if I was ready to hear what he had to say. I had always been his protector, but right now, something dark lurked in the corners of his mind, something I wasn't prepared for. Lucas's chest hitched with sobs as he fought to get the words out. "Mommy was with Uncle Sam in the bedroom." I froze. My best friend, no, practically my brother, the man who had stood beside me through thick and thin, Sam. The weight of Lucas's words pressed down on me like a physical force. I felt my hands tighten on his small frame involuntarily before I forced myself to relax. "What were they doing, Lucas?" I asked, my voice steady despite the chaos brewing inside me. He sniffled his breath, coming in shaky gulps. "They were laughing, and Mommy was sitting on his lap." He whispered, burying his face in my shoulder. They said tonight was the night they get rid of you. Uncle Sam told Mommy he was going to come live with us forever." My heart, which had been steadily pounding in my chest, seemed to stop altogether. My grip tightened on him again, my fingers digging into his back as if holding on to him would prevent my world from shattering any further. Lucas's words replayed in my head, each one more horrifying than the last. Uncle Sam, my best friend, my wife in my own home, planning to remove me from the picture. My mind couldn't process the betrayal, but they had made one critical mistake, dragging Lucas into it. My son, that was unforgivable. I pulled back just enough to look into his tear-streaked face. "Lucas, listen to me," I said, my voice a whisper but firm. "Daddy's not going anywhere, okay? Daddy's strong, stronger than anything bad that might happen. Do you understand?" He nodded, though his eyes were still wide with fear, his trust fragile. I held him a moment longer until his breathing slowed and the sobs subsided. I wasn't sure what to do next, but one thing was clear. This wasn't just about infidelity. They were planning something far worse, and I needed to act fast. After tucking Lucas into bed, I stood in the hallway outside his room, staring at the door for a moment. My legs felt heavy, like they were made of lead, but I forced myself to move. Each step toward the bedroom felt like I was walking into a battle, and in a way I was. The house was quiet, unusually quiet, the kind of silence that only seemed to occur when something terrible was about to unfold. I reached the bedroom door, hesitating for just a moment. My hand hovered over the door knob, trembling with a mix of anger, fear, and the growing urge to make them pay for what they had done. I could hear the low murmur of the TV from the other side of the house, but in this moment, everything felt unbearably silent. The air seemed to thicken with each passing second, the weight of my next move pressing down hard. I knew what was coming, yet nothing could have truly prepared me. With a deep breath, I pushed the door open slowly, trying to steady my racing thoughts. If she was Angela, my wife, the woman I had loved for over a decade, sitting on the bed casually scrolling through her phone, the scene before me would have seemed entirely normal, just a day ago. But now it felt surreal, like I was seeing her for the first time. The ease with which she lay there, as if she hadn't just been caught plotting to ruin my life, made my blood boil. She didn't even look up when I entered the room. I shut the door behind me softly but firmly, and the click seemed to finally catch her attention. She glanced up, her face expressionless for a moment, then her lips curled into a smirk. I stepped inside, my voice tight. "We need to talk, Angela. Can't it wait?" she said lazily, still engrossed in her phone. I'm in the middle of something. I clenched my fist in my side. No, I can't wait. At that, she finally looked up, her eyes meeting mine with an expression that was more annoyance than surprise. For a second, I saw something flicker in her gaze. Guilt? Maybe, or fear. But it vanished almost as quickly as it appeared. She sighed heavily and set her phone down, her lips curving into a mocking smile. Oh, she said with a small laugh, her voice cold, almost mocking, as if the whole situation was nothing more than a mild inconvenience. Her fingers brushed across her phone screen lazily, setting it down on the nightstand like she had all the time in the world. I clenched my fists at my sides, forcing myself to breathe steadily. Lucas told me everything, I said, my voice steady but laced with quiet fury. How could you? How could you drag him into this, into your mess? Angela sighed, rolling her eyes like a bored teenager being lectured by a parent. Oh, spare me the guilt trip, she said, her tone dripping with contempt. This was bound to happen sooner or later. Sam and I are in love. Jordan, you've been just in the way. In the way of what exactly? Destroying our family, manipulating our son into your twisted little fantasy. Angela's smirk deepened, and she leaned back against the headboard, crossing her arms. You're so dramatic. Lucas will be fine eventually. Kids are resilient. As for you, you were never part of the plan. Not really. She paused, then looked at me as if she had just solved an equation that had baffled her for years. Sam is what I need. Jordan, you're old news. Before I could process her words, a shadow moved from the far corner of the room. I stiffened instinctively, knowing who it was before I even saw his face. Sam stepped forward, his massive frame filling the doorway. His presence was like a storm cloud, dark and oppressive. He smiled, smug, the kind of smile that made my stomach turn. You're finished, old man, Sam said, his voice low but filled with a confidence that only added to the anger burning inside me. We've been planning this for months. There's no way you can stop it now. I stared at him, barely recognizing the man I once called my best friend. The casual betrayal, the arrogance, it was staggering. How long had he been sneaking behind my back? How long had they both been plotting to destroy everything I had worked for? I wanted to lunge at him to wipe that smirk off his face, but I knew I couldn't lose my temper now, not yet. You think this is over? I asked quietly, forcing my rage down though every word burned on my tongue. Sam's smile widened. It's already done, Jordan. You're out. Angela and we got this all figured out. You might as well make it easier on yourself and just leave. Hell, we'll even let you take your kid for the weekend if you ask nicely. Angela chuckled beside him, the sound sending a fresh wave of anger through me. This wasn't just betrayal. They were gloating, enjoying every second of their victory. They thought I was broken, that I would just roll over and accept defeat. I took a step closer to Sam, watching his eyes narrow slightly, the arrogance flickering for just a second. He wasn't expecting that. He thought I'd back down, that I'd be afraid. But fear wasn't in the cards anymore. Not after what they'd done to Lucas, to our family. You really think I'm going to just walk away? I asked, my voice low but steady. You think you're going to take everything from me, destroy my family, and I'll just stand here and let it happen? Sam shrugged, though I could see the way his jaw clenched, a hint of uncertainty flashing in his eyes. You don't have a choice, Jordan, he said. It's already in motion. We've made sure you don't have any options left. Angela leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees, and smiled sweetly, as if she hadn't just torn my life apart. You were never strong enough to fight for what you wanted. It's why you lost me, Jordan. It's why Sam is here now, and you're out. I shook my head, trying to keep my temper under control, but her words stung more than I expected. This isn't a game, Angela, I said. You don't get to play with people's lives and walk away without consequences. Angela raised an eyebrow. Consequences? What consequences, Jordan? She asked, gesturing around the room. Look around, you're standing in our house, in our bedroom. You don't have any power here anymore. Sam stepped closer, his chest nearly brushing mine. You should go now, Jordan, before things get messy. The threat hung in the air, and for a moment, I considered it, leaving, walking out, letting them have each other and be done with it. But then I remembered Lucas. I remembered the look in his eyes when he told me what he had seen. I remembered how they had involved him in their sick little plan. How they were ready to destroy his sense of security, just to fulfill their selfish desires. No, I said firmly, my voice cutting through the tension. I'm not going anywhere. Sam's smirk faltered for just a second, but he quickly regained his composure. Big talk for someone with nothing left, he sneered. I looked him straight in the eye, letting the silence stretch between us. You're wrong, I said slowly. I have everything to fight for. You're just a coward hiding behind a stolen life. Sam's expression darkened, his bravado lipping. He took a step forward, fists clenched at his sides. You're testing my patience, Jordan. I stood my ground. And you've been testing mine. The room felt charged, like the air before a lightning strike. Angela watched us with narrowed eyes, but for the first time since I entered the room, she looked uncertain. Sam, on the other hand, was a coiled spring, ready to lash out. But I could see it now, the cracks in his confidence. He wasn't as sure as he pretended to be. You're outnumbered, Sam, he said, his voice low and threatening. You can't win this. I took a slow, deliberate breath. You're right, I can't win here. But this isn't where the real fight happens. You've underestimated me, Sam, and that's your biggest mistake. Angela's eyes flicked between us, her lips pressing into a thin line. What are you talking about? I glanced at her, then back at Sam. You'll find out soon enough. The silence that followed my words was thick with tension. I could see Sam's posture stiffen, his confidence wavering, though he tried to mask it. Angela's bravado held firm, but only just. Her eyes flicked to Sam for a moment, searching for reassurance. You both made a huge mistake, I said, letting the words hang in the air between us. Not just the cheating, not just the lies. No, the real mistake was involving my son. That's something I will never forgive. Angela scoffed, though her voice lacked its earlier conviction. Oh, please, Jordan. You always have to make this about some moral high ground, don't you? We're leaving tonight. We're done with you and your pathetic little life. You can't stop us. I took a step closer, meeting her gaze. The amusement in her eyes dimmed just a little as I leaned in. You really think you can walk away from this? That you can just pack your bags and disappear without consequences? You have no idea what's coming. Her face faltered for a split second, a crack in the mask she was trying to hold. But before I could push further, Sam stepped between us, his broad frame blocking me from Angela. He leaned in, attempting to intimidate me. We're done talking, Jordan. We're leaving tonight. And there's nothing you can do about it. I didn't flinch, didn't even blink. Sam had always been the type to rely on his physical presence to bully others. It had worked on plenty of people but not on me. Not now. Instead, I chuckled darkly, the sound breaking the tense silence in the room. You think you're in control here, don't you? I asked, stepping around him and pacing the room slowly, making them both watch me. But you don't know what I've been doing, what I've been preparing for. Angela frowned. What are you talking about? You haven't done anything. I stopped and faced her, a slow, deliberate smile creeping onto my face. You really think I didn't see this coming? That I didn't notice the late nights, the whispers, the way you've been slipping out of bed after midnight? Angela blinked, her mouth opening slightly, but no words came out. Sam looked at her, then back at me, his brow furrowed. I've known for a while, I continued. I knew something was off, and I did my homework, quietly, carefully. Do you know what I found, Angela? Her face paled just a touch, but she held her ground. What are you even talking about? You're bluffing. I laughed again, a sharp, cold sound. Bluffing? Do you want to hear the recordings, Angela, the ones I made of your phone calls with Sam? Or maybe I should show you the video footage I've got from your little rendezvous at the hotel downtown. You see, I made sure I had proof of everything. Sam's face darkened, the realization hitting him hard. You recorded us? I replied, my voice calm. Sam's fists clenched at his sides. He took a step toward me, his voice low and threatening. You think you're smart, don't you? You think this changes anything? Oh, it changes everything, I said, locking eyes with him. Because I have enough to bury both of you. You wanted to take everything from me, my family, my son. But now I hold all the cards. Angela's confidence was rapidly unraveling. You can't be serious. You're not going to go to the police. You wouldn't do that to Lucas. I stepped closer to her, my voice lowering to a whisper. You put Lucas in the middle of this sick game you've been playing. Don't pretend you care about him now. Her lips parted, but she had no response. She hadn't expected me to fight back, hadn't expected me to prepare for this moment. Sam's patience finally snapped. He lunged at me, grabbing the front of my shirt, trying to shove me against the wall. You think this is over? He growled. You think you won? I didn't struggle. I stood firm, my eyes boring into his, unflinching. Get your hands off me, Sam. For a moment, he hesitated, then released me, taking a step back. His chest heaved with barely contained rage. You think you're better than us, he said? That you can outsmart us? I straightened my shirt and took a step toward him, closing the distance he had just created. I don't think I know, I said. You see, Sam, I've already contacted a lawyer. I've already filed the paperwork. By morning, Angela will be served with divorce papers, and you'll both be looking at a restraining order. As for my son, there's no way in hell I'm letting you anywhere near him. Angela's eyes widened as the reality of the situation started to sink in. You can't do this, Jordan. You're not serious. You don't have the guts. I looked at her, my voice cold and steady. You should have known better, Angela. You pushed me too far. The room was thick with silence, the gravity of the situation hitting both of them like a freight train. Sam looked at Angela, the confidence drained from his face. What do we do now? He muttered, clearly not expecting to be in this position. Angela, for the first time since I entered the room, looked unsure of herself. We leave tonight. We still leave. I shook my head. No, you're not going anywhere. Not yet. Not until I'm done with you. Sam's hands twitched at his sides, but he didn't make a move. He was trapped, just like Angela. They thought they could run, but they underestimated me from the beginning. I wasn't the weak, oblivious husband they thought I was. I had spent weeks preparing for this, making sure that when the time came, they would have no way out. You can try to run, I said, taking a step back toward the door. But everything's already set in motion. You won't get far, and when this is over, I'll make sure both of you feel every ounce of the pain you tried to inflict on me. I saw the fear flicker in Angela's eyes, the realization that she had lost control. Sam stood frozen, his fists still clenched, but the fight had gone out of him. You're going to regret ever thinking you could betray me, I said quietly, my hand resting on the doorknob. And you're going to regret even more involving my son. It began with Sam. His arrogance was palpable, was the smugness radiating from him. Every time he opened his mouth, he had always relied on his physical strength and bluster to get his way, but I knew better. I knew the man behind the bravado, his insecurities, his shady business dealings, the financial problems he hid from everyone. He thought he could intimidate me, that I would fold at the first sign of confrontation. I was counting on it. The room was thick with tension as I stood near the door, watching Sam pace like a caged animal. Angela remained frozen on the bed, her eyes flicking between Sam and me, unsure of what to do next. Sam was too overconfident, too wrapped up in his inflated sense of self-worth, to see what was coming. He lunged at me, trying to grab my shirt, his face contorted with rage. You think you can mess with me, Jordan? He snarled, his fingers brushing the fabric of my collar. I'll end you. I moved swiftly, sidestepping his advance and grabbing his arm in one fluid motion before he could react. I twisted it behind his back, pushing him down with my weight. He hit the floor hard, his face smashing into the carpet with a grunt of pain. Angela gasped, standing up from the bed, but her feet stayed rooted to the floor as she watched in shock. Sam let out a cry, his voice shaking with pain and fury. Let go, you bastard. I leaned in closer, keeping the pressure on his arm, my knee digging into his back. You've already lost, Sam, you just don't know it yet. His struggles grew more desperate, but he was no match for the hold I had on him. His breath came in short, angry bursts as he tried to lift his head, but I kept him pinned. Jordan! Angela! She screamed, finally finding her voice. She rushed forward as if to help Sam, but I released him before she could reach us, stepping back as he scrambled awkwardly to his feet. His face was red, both from anger and the humiliation of being brought down so easily. Sam stood up, rubbing his sore arm, his eyes burning with hatred. "You're going to regret that," he spat, wiping the sweat from his brow. "I swear you're dead." I tilted my head slightly, a small smile playing on my lips. "No, Sam. It's you who regret everything, you and Angela both." Angela finally spoke up, her voice shaky but still defiant. "We're leaving, Jordan. You can't keep us here. And you can't stop what's going to happen. Sam and I are done with you," I said, stepping toward her. "You think I'm just some obstacle you can bulldoze over and leave behind. I told you before. I've been preparing for this. You think you can just walk away. But you're already trapped. There's no escape." Angela hesitated, her confidence slipping again. "What are you talking about, Sam?" Trying to regain some of his earlier bravado, he stepped between us again. "Enough of this. We're leaving now." I took a deep breath, savoring the moment. They still didn't realize how deep I had set the trap, how everything was already in motion. I glanced at my phone, which had been recording every word since I entered the room. Every threat, every admission of their betrayal. It was all there, ready to be used when the time was right. "You really don't see it, do you?" I said, looking at both of them. "You think this is just about leaving. You think you'll get away with what you've done." Angela crossed her arms, her frustration evident. "And what exactly do you plan to do, Jordan? You can't stop us." I chuckled softly, shaking my head. "I don't have to stop you. You've already stopped yourselves. I've told you, I got everything I need. The proof of your affair, the threats, the conspiracy to get rid of me. It's all recorded, every word. And that's just the beginning. But that's not the worst of it. See, Sam, I did some digging into your finances, your business deals. Turns out you've been making some very questionable decisions lately. Haven't you?" Sam's bravado faltered again, his mouth twitching nervously. He glanced at Angela, but she looked just as lost as he did. "What the hell are you talking about?" Sam growled. "Your investments," I continued, stepping closer to him. "The ones that have been failing. You're running out of money, Sam, and you've been trying to cover it up with shady side deals. Ones that aren't exactly legal. I've got the paperwork. I've got the contacts. I can make a few phone calls, and by morning you'll be looking at more than just financial ruin." Sam's face turned pale. "You're bluffing," I said, locking eyes with him. "I don't bluff." Angela's expression shifted from anger to fear. She had always depended on Sam to be the strong one, the one who could handle everything. But now she could see the cracks forming, the reality that their entire plan was falling apart. "What do you want, Jordan?" Angela finally asked, her voice quieter now. "What's the point of all this?" "The point," I repeated, raising an eyebrow, "is that you both thought you could walk all over me, take my son, destroy my life, and move on like nothing happened. But actions have consequences, Angela. And now you're going to face them." Sam clenched his fists, taking a step toward me. "You think this is over? You think you've won? This isn't finished. Not by a long shot." I met his gaze unflinching. "Oh, it's finished. You're finished. By tomorrow, everyone's going to know what you've done. You're going to lose everything, Sam, your reputation, your money, your freedom." Angela's voice trembled. "Jordan, please don't do this. We can work something out." I shook my head. "There's nothing to work out, Angela. You made your choice. Now you live with it." The room fell silent again, the weight of my words sinking in. Sam stood there defeated, his shoulders slumped, while Angela stared at the floor, realizing how far they had fallen. I turned toward the door, leaving them standing in the wreckage of their failed plan. "You'll both be hearing from my lawyer in the morning. And after that, you'll never see Lucas again." With that, I walked out, the trap fully sprung. They had no idea what was coming next, but they would soon learn. The morning sunlight crept through the curtains, bathing the room in an almost serene glow, as if mocking the storm I had unleashed. Today was the day it all came crashing down for them, and I was ready to watch them burn in the rubble of their own choices. It started with Sam at precisely 8:30 a.m. 2 police cars pulled up to his office building. He was sitting at his desk, undoubtedly nursing the bruises from the previous night's confrontation when the officers knocked on his door. The look of confusion on his face as he answered their questions quickly turned to panic when they began laying out the fraud charges against him. "You're under investigation for multiple counts of financial misconduct, tax evasion and fraud," one of the officers said coldly, his tone leaving no room for ambiguity. Sam's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "What? That's impossible. Who told you this?" His voice cracked as the reality of the situation began to sink in. The officer handed him a warrant, and Sam's hands shook as he read it, his face growing paler with each word. His business partners were already aware of the situation, and within the hour, they had frozen his assets and cut all ties with him. The company he had worked so hard to build was slipping through his fingers like sand, and he could do nothing to stop it. Meanwhile, Angela had no idea what was about to hit her. She was still asleep when I made my move. The divorce papers were filed by 9 a.m., and I had requested full custody of Lucas. The mountain of evidence I had gathered, texts, emails, recordings of her affair with Sam, was more than enough to ensure the court would see things my way. She wouldn't just lose Lucas, she'd lose everything. Angela had never been one to care much for appearances, but I knew that being exposed for who she really was would tear her apart. I made sure that her infidelity, her betrayal, and her attempt to manipulate our son were broadcast far and wide. Her family, her friends, even her colleagues, they would all know what she had done by midday. The whispers had already started. Her phone rang incessantly, messages flooding in. But the more she ignored them, the louder they got. By noon, Angela's mother was banging on her front door, demanding answers. "What have you done, Angela? How could you do this to your family? To Lucas?" Her mother's voice cracked with disbelief as Angela tried to defend herself. "You don't understand," Angela yelled back, her voice desperate. "It's not what it looks like." But there was no explanation that could cover this. Her mother left, tears in her eyes, leaving Angela to realize just how alone she was becoming. She tried calling Sam, but his phone went straight to voicemail. Sam, now neck-deep in legal trouble, had bigger problems to deal with than answering her panicked calls. By the afternoon, Angela's world had come crashing down. I had leaked enough information to ensure that every person she knew, friends, family, and even acquaintances, would see her for the traitor she was. There was no running from it, no denying it. I laid everything bare. Meanwhile, Sam's life continued to unravel. After being escorted out of his office by police, he had spent hours being questioned. His confidence quickly evaporated as the reality of his crime set in. His attempts to explain away the charges fell on deaf ears. Every deal, every under-the-table transaction he thought he had hidden was now out in the open, meticulously documented and handed over to the authorities. By the time he left the police station, his reputation was in shambles. News of his fraud had spread like wildfire through the business community, and there wasn't a single person willing to stand by him. He tried to reach out to a few of his old colleagues, but the responses were all the same, cold silence or worse, a door slammed in his face. When Sam finally made it home that night, the reality of his downfall hit him hard. His home, once a sanctuary, felt like a tomb. Angela was there, sitting on the couch, her face a mixture of fear and anger. "Where the hell have you been?" she snapped, her voice trembling. "I've been calling you all day." Sam glared at her, his jaw clenched. "Do you have any idea what I've been dealing with? I'm under investigation for fraud. My business is gone, Angela. It's all gone." Angela's eyes widened in shock. "What? How? That's impossible." "Nothing's impossible," Sam muttered bitterly. "Especially not when you've got someone like Jordan pulling the strings." Angela stood up, her panic rising. "Jordan did this. But how? How could he? He's been planning this for months," Sam yelled, his frustration boiling over. "He had all the dirt on me, on us. He's ruined everything." Angela sank back onto the couch, her mind racing. "This can't be happening. This can't be real." "Oh, it's real," Sam spat, pacing the room. "And it's only going to get worse." Angela buried her face in her hands, tears streaming down her cheeks. "What do we do now? Where do we go?" Sam stopped pacing and stared at her, his eyes filled with hopelessness. There's nowhere to go. We're finished. As the day dragged on, the weight of their choices became unbearable. Angela and Sam were trapped, their lives unraveling faster than they could keep up. Every attempt to salvage something, anything, was met with failure. The people they thought they could rely on turned their backs. The support they had once enjoyed disappeared. By evening, Angela sat in the dimly lit living room, staring blankly at her phone as messages from friends and family continued to pour in, messages of disgust, disappointment, and outrage. Sam sat in silence across from her, nursing a drink, his eyes vacant, his mind numb from the relentless onslaught of bad news. The house, which had once been filled with laughter and life, now felt suffocating. They were prisoners in their own mess, their future stripped away, leaving nothing but the consequences of their actions. Meanwhile, I sat in my own home, the sound of Lucas's laughter echoing through the halls. I had gotten everything I wanted. The divorce was already in motion, and full custody of my son was all but guaranteed. Angela and Sam would be lucky if they saw the inside of a courtroom without a mountain of legal troubles burying them first. I didn't just want revenge. I wanted them to feel every ounce of the pain they had inflicted on me, on Lucas. Now, as they sat in the wreckage of their ruined lives, I knew they would never escape it. They had underestimated me. That was their first mistake. But involving my son was the last mistake they would ever make. Months had passed since the storm of betrayal tore through my life, and finally the chaos began to fade. There were moments I wondered if I'd ever feel normal again, but those doubts were behind me now. Lucas's laughter filled our home once more. And that was all I needed to know that I had done the right thing. It hadn't been easy, custody battles rarely were, but I had come prepared. I knew that when it came down to it, the courts would see the truth, see who had Lucas's best interest at heart. Angela had tried to fight, of course. She claimed I was trying to ruin her out of spite, but the evidence spoke for itself. The affair, the lie, the way she'd involved Lucas in their twisted plans. All of it painted a clear picture, and the judge saw through her thin defense. The day of the ruling was tense. I sat in the courtroom, my hands gripping the edge of the bench, waiting for the final decision. Angela sat across from me, her face pale, eyes wide with anxiety. It was a far cry from the smug, arrogant woman who had once believed she could manipulate her way out of any situation. The judge looked down at us from his bench, his expression stern but fair. Given the evidence presented and in consideration of the child's best interests, full custody is awarded to the father. The relief that flooded my body was indescribable. Angela let out a small gasp, her hand flying to her mouth. She leaned toward her lawyer, whispering furiously, but it was too late. The decision had been made, and there was no going back. After the hearing, Angela tried to speak to me. "Jordan, please," she began, her voice shaky. "We can find a way to work this out. I didn't mean for things to go this far." I met her eyes, but all I saw was desperation. "You made your choices, Angela. You involved Lucas in something he never should have been a part of. There's no going back from that." I turned away, not interested in hearing any more of her excuses. I had my son, and that was all that mattered. With custody settled, I turned my focus toward rebuilding my life. It had been shattered by betrayal, but now it was time to put the pieces back together. It started slowly, small steps toward normalcy. Lucas and I found a new rhythm, one that didn't involve the constant tension and deceit that had plagued our home for so long. We played catch in the yard, watched movies on the weekends, and I tucked them in at night, knowing he felt safe and loved. It was around this time that I met Isabella. I wasn't looking for anything serious. I wasn't sure if I ever would again. But something about her drew me in. She was kind, patient, and most importantly, she adored Lucas. She wasn't trying to replace anyone. She was just there, supporting us both in the quiet, steady way that I hadn't realized I needed. The first time I introduced her to Lucas, I was nervous. Would he accept her? Would he feel like I was trying to replace his mom? But to my surprise, he warmed up to her almost immediately. They bonded over small things. Her love for drawing, his fascination with anything that had wheels. I watched them build a Lego set together, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something close to peace. One evening, as I sat on the porch watching Lucas play in the yard, Isabella joined me. She handed me a cup of coffee and sat down beside me, her gaze soft and understanding. "How are you feeling?" she asked gently, her hand resting lightly on mine. I took a sip of the coffee, savoring the warmth. "Better," I admitted. "For the first time in a long time, I feel like things are going to be okay." She smiled, squeezing my hand. "You've been through a lot, Jordan. You and Lucas both, but you're strong. You've built something beautiful here." I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could be happy again. As the weeks turned into months, Isabella became a permanent part of our lives. Lucas adored her, and it wasn't long before she moved in with us. We were a family, not in the way I had originally imagined, but in a way that felt right. There was love, trust, and most importantly, peace. Meanwhile, Angela's life continued to spiral out of control. After losing custody, she tried to rebuild, but it was clear that Sam had no intention of sticking around. Under the pressure of his legal troubles and the collapse of his business, he cut ties with her and vanished, leaving her to face the wreckage of their lives alone. I heard through mutual friends that Angela had fallen on hard times. She lost her job and was unable to hold on to anything steady with her reputation in tatters. The whispers of her betrayal followed her wherever she went, and it wasn't long before she moved out of the city altogether, trying to escape the mess she had created. But no matter where she went, she couldn't outrun the consequences of her actions. Sam's fate wasn't much better. The PR charges stuck, and he ended up serving time for his crimes. By the time he was released, his life was unrecognizable. His business was gone, his relationships destroyed, and any chance of rebuilding what he had was long behind him. I didn't feel pity for them. They had made their choices, and now they had to live with them. But as for me, I had moved on. I had found something better, someone who loved me and loved Lucas as her own. One evening as we sat around the dinner table, Isabella, Lucas, and me, Lucas looked up from his plate, his eyes bright. "Dad, do you think we can go to the park tomorrow?" I smiled, ruffling his hair. "Of course, buddy, we'll make a day of it." Isabella laughed softly, leaning in to kiss me on the cheek. "Sounds like a plan." As I looked around the table at the life I had built from the ashes of my past, I realized something important. It wasn't revenge that had brought me peace. It wasn't Angela and Sam's downfall that gave me satisfaction. It was this quiet, simple happiness. This life full of love, trust, and a future I could believe in. I had my son, I had Isabella, and for the first time in a long time, I had hope. The shadows of the past were gone, and in their place a new beginning had emerged, one filled with the kind of peace I never thought I'd find again. And that, more than anything, was the sweetest revenge of all.